Conference Championship Sunday here on SportsGrid. I'm Kevin Walsh. That is Donnie Rightside. That is Joe Lisi. We are live with you here. It is Pro Football Today. Two big ball games, one in Baltimore, one in San Francisco, both with line movement towards the favorite. The Niners up from 7 to 7.5. Nowhere near as much as the Ravens going from 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5 now, the primary number on the Baltimore Ravens, Joe. Favorites starting to see the money come in on them throughout this week.
And you saw last week they started slow, 10-10 at halftime, take the second half and just blow out the Houston Texans, win that ball game by double digits. Lamar Jackson, $152 through the air, 2 touchdowns, 100 yards on the ground, another 2 touchdowns, accounts for 4, and dominates the defense at every given angle. Kansas City's going to need to step up, Kev. And when you look at the flip side in regards to the NFC Championship game, in regards to Detroit and San Francisco, Detroit gets pushed by Tampa Bay. They pull it ahead in terms of the second half. San Francisco struggles with Green Bay, does get the late touchdown drive by Brock Purdy. Both ball games are setting up to be marquee conference championship games. We'll see how it plays out in just a few hours.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's nice, too. We're not really all that worried about weather conditions on either coast here. The Baltimore Ravens game looks like we might not even get precipitation during that game. Out on the West Coast, as good a conditions as you can possibly get, close to 70 degrees, 2-mile-an-hour winds, and no precipitation in that forecast. Clean forecast across. Now, if we're taking a look at where these lines have been moving, I agree with the Ravens line. I do. I think it should be up at 4.5. They're the better football team. They should win this game. And quite frankly, both of these games are going to be very fun to watch and very fun to handicap as we go on the show. I can't wait for 3 o'clock. And that game is where I need to be.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Can I get off early?
No.
6:30 is that start. That's going to be a tough one.
You're on air until 3 today, pal, whether you know it or not. Radio audience is live here on SportsGrid Sirius XM Channel 159. Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, Joe Lisi, Pro Football Today. Let's start with this, Ravens Chiefs. We're going to have plenty of time to break these games down. We do have some head coaching news we're going to get to in a bit here. But the injury news, Don, and this is something I've heard you talk about throughout this week, it is all coming up Baltimore. It's not just Mark Andrews coming back. It's Marlon Humphrey coming back on the defensive side of it, and Joe Thuney, right? One of the linchpins of this offensive line for Kansas City goes out. You go back, and it was a nightmare, admittedly, day for me, but Chiefs, Bucks, Super Bowl, and all anybody could talk about was how the banged-up offensive line left the Chiefs hopeless, and obviously it did in that football game. I'm not saying it's apple to apples, but we've seen Mahomes play with a banged-up offensive line against a top-tier defense, and it was an ugly football game.
Exactly. And also, you can take a look at Thuney on the offensive line. Willie Gay Jr., linebacker, banged up with that neck injury last week. He's supposed to give it a go today. And also Isaiah Pacheco. We didn't practice all week. Right. Do we expect him to play today? Of course we do. But how effective is he going to be? It's one of those things we look at. Who's the healthy team at the right time? You forget about who you play. It's when you play them. We saw the Chiefs last week get away with playing a team on Buffalo that was banged up the week before. The Miami Dolphins were banged up. This Baltimore team, as healthy as you can be across the board.
Absolutely. And think about what they did in terms of the second half of that ball game against Houston. 228 rushing yards in terms of that ball game, averaged well over 4 yards per carry, holds Houston to just 2.7 yards per rush. They put C.J. Stroud into predictable third downs. If Kansas City can't run the football today, that means long third downs. Pat Mahomes potentially under pressure and maybe short to intermediate throws underneath coverage, and that's the recipe to basically getting Pat Mahomes off the field and giving Lamar Jackson multiple opportunities to potentially score points in this matchup, Kev.
The total checking in right now, 44.5, has not seen really much movement at all throughout this week. There has been conversation of will it rain, won't it rain? We will talk about that, but it does feel like if you don't have your wagers in and you're waiting for weather, I mean, you're probably betting this game at 2:45 then, and you get that latest possible weather report. Should be clear skies, though, in San Francisco. This 7.5-point move, it's been tough to tell how much of that is money, how much of that is just Deebo Samuel being back. I saw this, and I want to see if I can find this here quickly. This season, when Deebo Samuel starts and finishes a game, they are 12-1 straight up, 10-3 against the number San Francisco. When he does not, 1-4 straight up, 0-5 against the number. look, there's a lot of great players on this team, but Debo has proven his value throughout this season and years past.
No, absolutely, and how they utilize him in regards to the run game on fly sweeps and the passing game as well. The key question for me in this ball game is, even though he's in that lineup, Donnie, can he take a hit as it relates to the rushing attack? Are they going to give him multiple opportunities to expose his body, even though he's back in practice, not taking any contact? How does that affect the game plan out of Kyle Shanahan, and more importantly, the pressure on now Brock Purdy? Because Brock Purdy did play at least a couple of drives in regards to the NFC Championship last year, got hurt, but Jared Goff won an NFC Championship, took his team to a Super Bowl. The pressure's on Brock Purdy in this passing attack today.
It really is, and I like Brock Purdy. He's going to throw for a lot of yards, probably multiple touchdowns, because that's what everybody does against the Detroit Lions. But, Joe, I like the point you're bringing up with Deebo Samuel. We have Doc coming on a little bit later on the show, and here's what's important about this. Just because you're cleared off of the practice report as you practice in full doesn't mean you're medically cleared to absolutely go out there and just do what you've always done. It means on a Friday practice, Deebo was able to catch some passes, run some routes, and do everything that the team asked him to do. That's a full practice report, which removes you from, hey, look, it's a questionable or a probable for the game. He's cleared off there, but as you pointed out, Detroit knows this. Deebo Samuel catches a slant over the middle. Are you telling me right now, if you're taking a look at that defensive coordinator, Glenn, is telling them in that pregame meeting, hats to the football. Yeah. I want to see 4 and 5 and 6 hits on Deebo Samuel when he gets the ball. Obviously being clean, but playing hard physical football. Let's see how Deebo holds up today.
We will, though he is one of the most elusive players I've ever seen in my life. So good luck
around him.
Good luck getting 4 hats on that guy. I think the quarterback comparison is very interesting because you're right. Goff has won an NFC Championship game before, but the Goff situation is not all that different from the one that Brock Purdy's in. None of the credit went to Jared Goff, and it was all about the head coach and Sean McVay. And what ultimately happened with Jared Goff is he was moved on from, and the Rams were better for it. I don't care what anybody says about where the Rams are now, cap-wise, where the lie. I don't give it. They won a Super Bowl, okay? That's what the goal is in this sport, and it's what the Rams were able to do with Matthew Stafford, and they were not able to do with Jared Goff. But for Brock Purdy, the opportunity is right here. The opportunity is now. Look, this team has been virtually unbeatable since Brock Purdy has been their quarterback. That's the reality of the situation, especially at home. And that's where they are in this football game. But this is not will they, won't they deliver on a minus 360 money line. I mean, that's a part of the conversation. There's a big-time spread in the conference championship game at 7.5, and it's something that we're going to need to dive into here, and we will. But coming up next, we have to take the opportunity to talk about the coaching cycle that's moved on here. It's going to give us a little bit more time to break into these 2 conference championship games. And when you look at the coaching news that's come out this week, a lot of big hires, but also one notable name not being selected here, and that is, for many, the greatest coach in the history of this league, Bill Belichick. What is next for him, and who got jobs and who didn't, all coming up next year on Pro Football Today.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night. only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant and then got the job with the Niners and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back right here on SportsGrid, we look at the coaching news that has come through this week, and it is incredible that the Falcons' decision to hire Raheem Morris became not about that decision, but the fact that Bill Belichick almost assuredly won't be finding a job. There are 2 job openings that remain. If you read the tea leaves, they're already filled. Ben Johnson's going to go to Washington. Mike McDonald's going to go to Seattle. We can get into that when there's time. But the fact that Bill Belichick did not come away with a job here does seem to be a surprise to everyone, whether that be Atlanta specifically or just the fact that he didn't get work anywhere. And for me, the reason why this stands out so much is it is not that Bill Belichick is going to struggle to make money. He can pick any network he wants and go become one of their lead commentators in studio. It's not that Bill Belichick couldn't pick 1,000 coordinator jobs potentially. Honestly, if he wanted, he could probably go get a Power 5 job in college right now if he decided he would. The thing that I am struggling a bit with, Joe, is the notion that Bill Belichick at his age is going to take a year off and come back as a head coach again next season. And that's basically where we are because there's no job coming for Bill Belichick this offseason, head coaching-wise in this league.
No, there's not, but I'm not really shocked the more I think about it, Kevin. Part of the reason is look at where we are in regards to the NFL and look at where we are in regards to Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. After Tom Brady moves on and wins the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay, he drafts Bailey Zappi. He drafts Mac Jones, can't elevate the quarterback position, can't put playmakers from an offensive perspective around that talent, and they struggle from an offensive identity. More importantly, look at what he did in terms of Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, co-offensive coordinators, defensive players, a special teams coach, Donnie, and he has them coaching the offense. He can't even get a grip in regards to coaching this team, and I think he's sort of regressed. Now, statistically, from a defensive perspective, they were good, but not elite, and when you have young playmakers like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and Tyler Algier, and you look at Arthur Smith, and he couldn't coach that offense up. Do you really want to give the reins to Bill Belichick in terms of that type of situation? I wouldn't, Donnie.
Which makes it perplexing because I think you're right with the way we angle Bill Belichick because for me it was like he's a fantastic coach. He just can't, be the entire guy in the organization to make every single call, draft picks, free agents, and and we have to find out if he actually wanted to do that or didn't want to do it. But if you're going from a defensive perspective and you say, okay, look, defense is the way to go here. Bill Belichick's probably the best defensive coordinator in the history of the sport itself. And then you hired Raheem Morris, who also is a defensive coordinator. You go Dave Canales, you go even with Callahan as the coach in Atlanta. Like, you know what? They went offensive. That's not what Bill Belichick's, cut from that same cloth. Belichick being left out for Raheem Morris does make it interesting, but also keep in mind, sometimes in the NFL world, as Kevin and I talked about this on the radio, organizations want to have functioning people all across the board. The owner obviously is going to own. You're not going to push him around. But there's football ops. There's, half of the building here with 25 to 30 scouts. Those guys want to have a job and have some input. Right. If Bill walks into your building, he's the end-all, be-all. It's almost like, what are we doing here in the front office anymore? And sometimes those organizations aren't going to like that. I'm surprised Belichick didn't land in Atlanta because we heard from their owner. Basically, the minute the season was over, let me get a one-on-one with Bill, love this guy, meet the rest of the crew. And the rest of the crew was like, now what's my job going to be if Bill's here? Well, you're going to get coffee and donuts, and we'll see what happens here. That's what I think actually went down more than itself being the better head coach was. They didn't want Bill Belichick just taking over the entire franchise.
But that, to me, was always the interesting thing. And the reports that came out was, apparently Bill is actually more interested in a rebuild than a steady contender, right? Now, Dallas and Philly did move on from their head coaches, but apparently if they had, and Bill could choose one of those landing spots or Atlanta, he would have decided on Atlanta, which I think confirmed your note, Donnie, of what Bill Belichick was after, which to me is disastrous and speaks to why he doesn't have a job. But I know, look, Bill has been doing this for a very long time, and so is Pete Carroll, and I'm not saying that those guys still can't coach at this league, but the numbers are the numbers. Now Andy Reid is the oldest head coach at 65. Next is John Harbaugh at 61. That means that Bill Belichick is going to be brought back in as a head coach, a decade older than everybody else outside of Andy Reid coming into next season. I did a short list. I don't need to bog people down with it because some of it will be wrong. There'll be surprises. 9 guys I could see next year being fired if this season does not go right. That might be extreme. It's not the point. 9 potential openings. Bill could land one of those, but I don't even know what he wants anymore. Bill wants a bottom-feeding team. Well, bottom-feeding teams showed this season they were a bit more interested in youth. Raheem Morris and Dave Canellis. I do want to push it forward because I don't want to spend the entire time on Bill Belichick because the big name that ended up being hired is John Harbaugh. The national champion winning head coach from the Michigan Wolverines moves back to the NFL. And the thing about this move for Jim Harbaugh, for Jim, is the success that he had in San Francisco feels like it happened forever ago. But, man, the second you get reminded of it, you go, man, this is an amazing hire. It's hard not to feel that way. Those first 3 seasons in the conference championship, I believe every year with the Super Bowl appearance in the middle of it, we know the Chargers roster has talent. It's now up to see if Harbaugh can make the most of it.
I think he can. How many years, though, does it take, I think, is the biggest question. You look at his record over there in terms of NFL, 44-19-1 overall, coached up physicality in regards to the offense and defensive lines. And what do we know about the L.A. Chargers, right? Their defense was basically a glass house. Brandon Staley, the defensive wizard, could not coach that defense up. They were dead last in terms of the NFL, had no defensive physicality, were pushed around in multiple ball games, gave up a 30-point lead in regards to a wild card game and lost. So they're going to get better. They're going to have an identity, Kev. The question is, does he rip it down outside of Justin Herbert, right? Does he look to build up what he wants from an offensive perspective and then utilize the defensive pieces there? I think they'll be improved discipline-wise. But that doesn't necessarily mean in year one, Donnie, that this team is automatically 12-5 overall.
No, I don't know if it is, but I don't think this is going to be a slow turnaround here. This is one of those, let me get my implementation in, which I expect a playoff run here this year for the Chargers. Then the following season, when everything is in for a full month, what do you got here?
No.
Just, I thought we had some hot news. It's good. But no, just back to Jim Harbaugh. I think out of every single move here, you get Jim Harbaugh, you can sell your fan base on that right away.
Oh, yeah.
Justin Herbert's got to be absolutely loving this. They're going to get a fullback. They're going to get a power running back in the backfield, and they're going to play with 2 tight end sets here. I love this because the one thing we've always talked about with the Chargers isn't the personnel. It's who's coaching them. And also, not soft is kind of an interesting word in the NFL for a football team. We know, obviously, NFL teams aren't soft, but you need that edge with the Chargers. He's going to bring that.
And honestly, I was just I'm probably overexcited to make a point, though.
Yeah.
What I think is very interesting about the Chargers is not many of these guys hired, if any, enter year one with, well, you got to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
That is the situation now with Jim Harbaugh. So that makes for an interesting scenario to kind of group the remaining hires together. Pats, and some of these obviously have been settled for a while. Pats hired Gerard Mayo. Vegas hires Antonio Pierce. Titans hire Brian Callahan, the Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator. Panthers go with Dave Canellis, Bucs OC, and the Falcons bring in Raheem Morris, the LA Rams defensive coordinator. Of that group, Joe, is there one you like or dislike the most?
I don't know. I actually like Canales, believe it or not. And I know he's a young guy, and I know he came off the radar in regards to Carolina. But think about what he did with Baker Mayfield in the second half of the season. They had an identity. We talked about Baker's progression, 290 passing yards per game over the last 7 weeks. He averaged basically almost 2 touchdown passes per game. They extended, and he utilized, in regards to that talent, put those players into one-on-one opportunities to excel. And with the young wide receiver core and Bryce Young, I think he could coach this team up, Donnie.
But here's the issue that I have. This was probably one of the deepest coaching pools we've ever seen. And you came away with Dave Canales or Callahan for the Titans here when you had unbelievable teams out there or guys that could come in and rebuild your team right away. But then again, the Carolina pick, which we focus on, did they have any options? Did a seasoned guy go, I'm not taking that job. This might be the only chance I get. I'm going to take that job here. Dave Canales isn't going to turn that down. It's like, hey, man, 1 year I'm an offensive coordinator, next year I'm a head coach. Sign me up.
The hire I worry the most about is one that I said needed to be made, which was the Raiders bringing in Antonio Pierce. Again, there was going to be a full-on revolt if they didn't do it, but it's one of those careful what you wish for situations. You get to the games, the AFC Championship, Lamar versus Mahomes, next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do, going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant and then got the job with the Niners and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets and when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The AFC Championship game in Baltimore features Mahomes and Lamar. And it is never that simple, but it is a starting point for this spread of 4.5. It is a number that we have not really seen since Patrick Mahomes was a rookie. If you look at Mahomes in his career, he has only been a dog of a field goal or more 5 times. 5-0 against the spread in those games. This is a guy who everybody knows, because it comes up every time that he's an underdog, is dominant against the number. But what I will say is this is the first time since Patrick Mahomes' rookie season we have seen him booked as a dog in consecutive games. When you see lines like this, and a line that has gone from 3.5 to 4.5, we can debate where it should be, but I can't help but make the point that it is there for a reason. Trust me, the odds makers know that many people today will wake up and go, oh, Mahomes, plus 4.5, money line. A lot of people, and a lot of people did it against Buffalo as well. I just cannot help but stress this enough, that this number is there for a reason, and it is not that they don't respect Pat Mahomes. Trust me, they do. Trust me, they probably wish they could push this up even higher. It is the amount of respect that the Ravens have consistently gained throughout the final stretch of this regular season and postseason, and the books having but no choice to put a stronger number out here on Baltimore, now up to 4.5.
Yeah, absolutely. And think about this. It is back-to-back road games for Pat Mahomes in Kansas City. And think about who they're playing in terms of Baltimore. Beat San Francisco in their house at the end of the regular season and dominated them, right?
Yeah.
Forced 5 turnovers. So that's the matchup. I think when you look at Kansas City as a whole, Kev, it's a different offense. Obviously, this year, not as explosive. We talked about it. Just look at Pat Mahomes' 4 300-yard games this year compared to last year where he had 10. Travis Kelce and those wide receivers are inconsistent. Rashee Rice last week only 42 receiving yards. They're averaging 245 passing yards per game. They're doing it with the rushing attack. They're doing it with Isaiah Pacheco. They're averaging 109 rushing yards on the ground. But that goes right into the strength of the front seven of Baltimore. Very good in terms of run support, giving up 107 rushing yards per game. So that is the chess match that will play out today. Can Baltimore force and put Pat Mahomes into long, predictable third downs? If they could do that, I think they win this ball game, Donnie.
You know, you take a look sometimes at the Kansas City Chiefs, right, and you say, boy, when they really struggle. There are games that we've watched where Patrick Mahomes, hike, he's under duress right away and just trying to be Superman the entire football game. I can envision seeing that sort of a play-out, because what are you going to need to do if you're Kansas City? I don't think you win this football game, guys, if Kansas City gets to 20 points and you win it 20-17. The reason I bring that up here, you take a look at October 22nd when the Baltimore Ravens took on the Detroit Lions. They hung 38 points. Let's go over the next couple weeks here for their football games. 38 points scored, 31, 37, 31, 34. Low point here, the Chargers with 20 points. They rebound with 37 points, then go on the road and take on Jacksonville and beat them in a lower scoring game, but still were able to win that 23-7. San Francisco 33, Miami 56. Take the Pittsburgh game out of the equation because, again, we didn't have the starters. 34 against Houston. This team is a juggernaut right now. And in the past, you might say to yourself, well, yeah, Mahomes and that offense can really get going. This is going to be a fun game. Who would have ever thought that we would get to this version of the AFC Championship game, and the better offense, the more high-flying offense is Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens? And it's not even close. It's not close.
Yeah, and to your point, who would have thought that before the year?
Correct.
No one. Who would have thought this by the time it was October? Everyone? I mean, that is the thing on Kansas City, is their offense has had so many struggles. But, wait, hold on a minute. We get to the playoffs. 26 and 27 points. Those are a pair of team total overs. I don't know, was the 26 a team total over against Miami?
Had to have been.
Right? I would have thought. I think it would have.
Freezing cold weather. That was in like the 30s, right? The high 30s,
I can't remember
low 40s?
exactly how low the number was.
Yeah.
I think it would have been
26 had to have
43 and a half.
Yeah,
So,
26 would have.
because I know they were booked as a favorite.
Right,
But
yeah.
the thing for Kansas City, and I don't want to do revisionist history on the game, and come on, what did you? But the Buffalo defense is as banged up as you could have possibly imagined heading into that game. Now, give the Chiefs credit. They absolutely dominated that team. Mahomes averaged over 9 yards per pass. Pacheco over 6 yards per carry. They were excellent in the game. But that offense now is going to a far more difficult situation. And I think that is what makes this so fascinating is, to some degree, you look at this game and you go, what's the most important? I don't even know if it's Mahomes specifically or Lamar specifically. C.J. Stroud, I get it, he's a rookie. 175 yards, 5.3 yards per pass, no offensive touchdowns from the Houston Texans last week. Averaged 2.7 yards per carry as a team. Now, you can tell me that the Chiefs' offense, well, yes, it has Mahomes, but based on what we've seen from this season, outside of they have Mahomes, where do you give the Chiefs advantages? And that's what I think kind of this game comes down to. Football is always more complicated than we make it, but at times it's maybe simpler than we actually kind of agree it is. If you are betting the Chiefs today, and this is fine reason, you are betting it entirely because of 15, and I would add Big Red into the equation, and of course Andy Reid, who's an all-time great head coach. There's not much else I can really subscribe to. The idea that Trent McDuffie, is Trent McDuffie and this Chiefs defense truly shut down here? I guess time will tell. But even if they are, they're not the better defense in this matchup there. But, man, as this thing goes on, it's a ton of points to lay to Pat Mahomes.
It is, but I think you have to look at the matchup, and to your point in regards to the playmakers for the Kansas City Chiefs, who is going to step up? They haven't faced potentially a linebacker crew with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen that could cover potentially Travis Kelce, can cover Isaiah Pacheco coming out of the backfield, and keep an eye out for what Josh Allen did on Kansas City last week. 72 rushing yards on the ground. We have Lamar coming off a 100-yard performance. If he can run the football and put pressure on that perimeter, then all of a sudden the play-action passing game is wide open in regards to this ball game. Now, statistically, Kansas City only given up 177 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. But again, for me, I think it's a breakout performance by Lamar today through the air. I think they throw it to run it later in this ball game. I don't think they're just going to line up, run Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Dalvin Cook early and often and look to get this game into like the low 20s, like 24-20. I think they look to explode, put the pressure on Mahomes to potentially match them score for score. Because think about this, Donnie. You always thought about Pat Mahomes and that Kansas City offense scoring consistently 30 points. Mm-hmm. You could potentially count on your finger how many games Kansas City scored 30. I think it's, 4 or 5 at the most, where last year it was almost every week that they were putting up points. That is the MO. The more consistent offense has been the Baltimore Ravens.
And two things here with the Ravens. This isn't one of those teams where we say to ourselves, guys, like, well, in the regular season, who did they beat? Now, they went toe-to-toe with the best in the NFL and wiped them off the map for the most instances late in that season. Detroit's still playing here. What happened in that game? Blew them away. Yep. San Francisco's still playing at this time of the year. What happened? Blew them away. But also, I'm taking into account here, Kansas City at home, though, up against the Miami Dolphins. What were that, 8 starters on defense? The entire linebacking core gone. You won that football game. You were supposed to, and you did look good doing it. I'm not going to take anything away from that. Going to the Buffalo game, as Kevin pointed out, this was a team that if you would have played that defense in September with Matt Milano at linebacker, Tre'Davious White, it might have been a different story, but it wasn't. You played them when they were banged up. Baltimore, again, getting guys back for this. Your best offensive weapon, Mark Andrews, is back for this game and healthy. He's been practicing for 2 weeks. Marlon Humphrey, is he a great cornerback in the NFL? Not necessarily, but he's probably their best cornerback overall in the secondary. He's going to come back to this football game. You are not going to get any cheap yardage or cheap points in this game. And again, getting back to Kevin's point, you had one of the high-flying offenses coming in last week in a blowout scenario. And in the second half, when the Ravens were like, we're still not going to let you score, that's as impressive as it gets. Every yard today is going to count for something for Kansas City. And keep in mind, if you like Isaiah Pacheco, 63.5 yards, dude didn't practice all week. Bad foot. Where does that come into it now? You're banged up at the worst time of the season going against a healthy, better football team in the Ravens.
This is, for me, why I've gone a bit back and forth on this total, but I think I've wrapped around to the initial thought that this is an under, and I think some of it is what I saw from Kansas City last week, funny enough, and I know eventually they did break through, but, man, that team did exactly what Donnie said they were going to do. Move it, move it, move it, move it. Ooh, red zone? What are we supposed to do down here? Field goal. You're not going to survive like that. There's a prop out there, total field goal yardage over today. It makes a lot of sense when you look at the caliber of kickers you have in this game with Butker and Justin Tucker here in this spot. And if I'm leaning towards the under, then is 4.5 points too many? I think it's one of those games I would feel more comfortable having the points here at 4.5, even if I think this could finish up something like 21 to 14. It actually wouldn't totally surprise me here with these football teams, because even if Lamar throws the ball early, Joe, if they get up, they will shut it down. Unless the Chiefs will have to match them score for score, because I watched it last week, and it's, again, why I think that what the Texans did last week was just so totally pathetic on both sides of the football, but especially defensively. If the Ravens are up, then all right, we're going to run the ball every play. We're going to run the football every single play because there's nothing you can do about it.
It's possible, but again, think about last week in regards to C.J. Stroud and that offense. He had some big plays over the middle. He missed some reads. He does hit Nico Collins over the middle. I don't think Pat Mahomes is going to be fazed by the defense. I just think in regards to the playmakers from just start of the game to the end, I think Baltimore is going to make more plays. That doesn't mean that both passing attacks can eat in terms of this matchup. I do feel that Baltimore will look to score first and put that pressure on Mahomes because of how successful Isaiah Pacheco and the rushing attack have been.
By the way, quickly, both playoff games for Kansas City have not surrendered a sack with Patrick Mahomes here. We'll see if that changes today. You got some really good sack guys there on that Ravens defense.
So far this season when the Chiefs have lost, they've scored 29, 17, 17, 19, and 14. Time will tell. We'll go to the NFC Championship game next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant, and then got the job with the Niners, and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event. The atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
San Francisco and Detroit. Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. Just how it was written. The Niners are a 7.5 point favorite. There are still plenty of sevens available in the market. It's about an even split right now. Your total is 51.5 with a 52 out there. So if you are an over-better, you probably do you want to go now, or do you wait a little bit here on this total? Could it drop 50.5 out of nowhere?
It could. I think it potentially gets to 52, though. I think both the perception. I do.
So, I know you hope it. You hope it does. You hope it does. What's your thoughts on this game? So, this is. I feel like this is maybe the best possible matchup we could have been given here, and I don't mean just from what remained last week, but
Tampa,
no, there's not even that. Like honestly, like if we were doing Niners Cowboys, it'd be so annoying. Like the line would be 6.
I was loving it right now.
Why? Because the total would be 54.5.
I mean,
you could bet CeeDee Lamb.
Pollard,
CeeDee
Lamb,
right.
Dak.
He's looking at the props. He's looking at the props.
Again, it's incredible. He's like, listen, I know every single one of these guys.
Yep.
I like this game
because.
Yep.
hot. So, but we have this spot here where you have two quarterbacks that I think there are still a lot of people who struggle to trust in Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. And Brock Purdy did not shower himself in glory with the game last week against the Green Bay Packers. But in a way, I believe, and I think I have to kind of just accept it. Clearly, I'm a huge Brock Purdy guy. That's just kind of how this is, decided to break out. But Brock basically did the exact opposite of what everybody expects from him in a game where he was awful for a lot of it and then stepped up on the final drive. He was awful for a lot of that football. The idea on Brock Purdy is perfect situation, perfect players, perfect coach, and he makes the most out of it, right? Makes way more out of it than Garoppolo, which he, at minimum, never gets enough credit for being significant. It's not that he's the same as Jimmy G. He is obviously, unequivocally, far better than Garoppolo ever was with San Fran, but that is besides the point. But Brock having a horrendous game, and then with 6 minutes left on the clock, leading this team down the field. And I get it. He didn't do it single-handedly. But the notion that they handed the ball off to McCaffrey 10 straight times and got down the field is completely inaccurate. He picked up multiple third downs, a great slant pass to Brandon Ayuk, used the legs down in the red area as well. I get it, CMC ran it in from the 6-yard line. But if you watched that drive and thought that, if I would have just put Sam Darnold in, it would have been the same, you're watching it through the lens of somebody who just completely dislikes Brock Purdy. So I continue to look at this game, and maybe it's the obvious idea, but I don't really care. Sometimes what's obvious is right. Brock Purdy is going to play significantly better in this game against Detroit, with especially how this secondary has been holding up than he did last week. So if the Lions are going to pull this out, that offense today needs to be clicking in every single aspect.
I agree with you in the sense of Purdy having a better, more consistent game. I don't necessarily think from a numbers perspective that he gets to where you think he could potentially get to in terms of their average 257 or even 275 plus in regards to this ballgame, because I think it is the offense approach that Detroit potentially takes in this ballgame to neutralize and keep Brock Purdy on the sidelines. Think about what Green Bay did with Aaron Jones. They ran the football. First drive, they take 7.5, 8 minutes off the clock, kick the field goal, set the tone, and then play a lower scoring game. That's the way I'm looking for this ball game to play out. But you're right, in terms of Brock Purdy and this offense, dominant. They're rushing San Francisco for 138 yards on the ground, throwing for 259 through the air. Same thing with Detroit. They're running for $131 on the ground against opposing defenses, throwing for 257. And Jared Goff over the last 4 weeks has averaged 288 passing yards per game. But in order to potentially win this ball game, sometimes your best defense is your offense controlling the clock, time of possession. So even though Brock Purdy might play much better today, Kev, and be cleaner with the football in terms of the throws, they might be short, they might be intermediate, and he might have limited opportunities. That's why I'm calling for the under, Donnie.
I'm not even worried about either one of these quarterbacks, Jared Goff or Brock Purdy. Let's take a look at the Detroit Lions. Well, Donnie, where do they struggle? Well, it's outdoors, non-dome-like conditions. Okay, really hot weather, really cold weather, windy and rainy or any precipitation. You take a look at the weather forecast today. 70 degrees at kickoff, light winds here. Let's talk about light, like 2 miles an hour, no precipitation here. Let's flip it over to Brock Purdy. Where did he struggle? I wouldn't even say last year in Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game he struggled, but it was a very good defense with a crazy good pass rush. He ends up getting knocked out of that football game. You saw him last week struggle a little bit against the Green Bay Packers. Why? Smaller hands. Do I wear a glove? Do I not wear a glove? It's rainy conditions. I couldn't perform. Again, same thing I just talked about there with Jared Goff. You're not going to have to worry about any conditions with him. And also, from an elite defense perspective, do I like the front seven for Detroit guys? Yes, I do. You know what I don't like? They're back four. So you should have a nice day here at a Brock Purdy and Jared Goff with no excuses going, what did you want him to do? It's a dome team. It's freezing cold. This is where you get that advantage. That's not there anymore for either guy. I expect both offenses to move the football today.
So this is an instance where I know Green Bay controlled the clock at the beginning of the game. They ended up with 38 seconds of total possession more than the Niners. So, again, it wasn't the triple option. And if Detroit's going to come out here and run the triple option, then good for them, but I don't necessarily expect that. But here is the other thing. If you look at some of the Brock Purdy numbers, his pass attempts prop is 30.5. And I saw that. I go, he got the football 31 times in this game? The idea is that it is chunk plays. I know that I look at these markets all the time, but you guys do as well. Brock Purdy's longest completion prop is 40.5. That's what we were betting in the semifinal when Michael Penix and Quinn Ewers were going ahead.
Yeah.
That's not an NFL number. That is not an NFL number. And I'll tell you this right now. That's not even really a Brock Purdy number. That's a Detroit Lions secondary number. That is a Detroit Lions defense that is allowing, at the moment, I understand it is 2 games, but still, 9.3 yards per pass attempt to the 2 offenses that they've faced so far. And I don't care what anybody out there thinks of Baker Mayfield or what anybody out there thinks of Matthew Stafford. Do not lie to my face and tell me that you think the Rams offense or the Bucs offense is better than the San Francisco 49ers offense. So quite honestly, Joe, Detroit can run the triple option if they want. I know I'm obviously elevated, but
right.
The idea from the books, and you can disagree, but is when the Niners touch the field, it's about 10 yards per play.
Yeah, it is. And think about when they played the Cowboys. Dak Prescott threw for 345, and it was a 20-19 ball game. So if you can limit, listen, San Francisco can move the football between the 30s as long as there's a red zone. A defense holds them to field goals and not touchdowns. This game potentially can trend to the under. I'm looking at it in terms of that type of philosophy. I'm looking at it as if, how does Detroit win this ball game? I think Detroit loses this game if it gets into the 50s because I just don't think their defense will hold up. I think the only way their defense can hold up is if they run it, sustain drives, and give limited opportunities to Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Kittle. You throw the kitchen sink at the Detroit Lions. I understand that, but hold them to field goals as opposed to touchdowns. They ran it for $125 on Dallas, and they have shown, especially on the road, to play under type of games. Not just Dallas, Tampa Bay. They won, 20-6? Goff throws for 355. That was a dead under in regards to that ball game. They contained Baker Mayfield. First game of the year against Pat Mahomes, 21-20. They ran the football. They forced turnovers. And whenever you play in terms of a playoff environment, you need to run the football effectively, especially on the road, and win the turnover battle. That doesn't mean Brock Purdy can't eat. I just think this game trends to the under because the only way Detroit can win this game is to really control the clock and force a game in like 24-20. They could pull it out that way. I don't think they do that.
I think it's more of an over, though. And the reason being is because I hear what you're saying where the Lions got to come out and establish the front line. And they can. They have a very good offensive line and also have 2 capable running backs that can do that. But also, you have Ben Johnson, who just from the OC title, he's the best offensive coordinator in the game. Play call a little bit different. You might argue McVay. You might argue, obviously, in the same game with Kyle Shanahan. But I don't think the Lions can afford to be like, hey, let's go 3 yards in a cloud of dust, eat up the time. I just think they have to be aggressive. And maybe, Joe, if they're up 14-3, you can sort of turn it back over and say, all right, Montgomery's going to be the lead dog now. Jameer Gibbs is going to factor in. Screen passes to Gibbs. We're going to catch them off guard because the 49ers might have to come out of their shell on defense and get really aggressive if they're down. The only thing I do worry about, again, you might have had me on that, Joe. If it's like, hey, you know what? 42 to give me the same weather conditions you had last week with the Green Bay Packers game. I might have agreed. It's dome conditions out there with 2 teams that like to get after it. It's just hard going to keep me in the 40s here, Kevin.
But here's the other thing that I think kind of we're going through it that you and I disagree on. The Lions aren't winning this game.
Right? Like, you're like, no, but
right.
it's fine. We can disagree.
Right.
But The reason I think you like the under is you like the Lions to win this
Correct.
game. I don't one bit.
Right.
That's not happening, folks. I'll give you a spoiler, all right? That's not happening. I mean, maybe they can hang around on the 7. We'll see. But it's just the Niners have been great in this bout all year long, and I don't trust Detroit either side of the football to step up in the way that they need to get the job done here. I don't think they are built to stop the Niners in any sense of the word, and I don't think they will. I really strongly believe that the Green Bay Packers missed the chance that this conference had to stop the Niners. I mean, if I'm being, if we're I think the Packers missed the chance the league had, quite frankly, to eliminate the San Francisco 49ers. We'll handle that when we're out in Vegas. Maybe I'll end up being wrong. Brock Purdy had his second lowest yards per attempt game of the entire season. He was awful against Green Bay. They win the football game 24-21. They get the job done. They got the job done because their defense did hold up in the red area. And maybe that's how this game plays out, where both these teams march down there and they're not able to turn it into touchdowns and they turn it into field goals instead. But I look, and this is, for me, where I would push towards the over as well. I mean, you look at these offenses here and what they bring to the table, the weaponry down in that red area is incredible. One guy who I'm not on today, and we'll talk about again our props more as we go through the show, but Sam Laporta last week, I know the quality of linebacker San Fran has. Look, Tampa Bay has some great linebackers in their own right, but the volume that Laporta was able to hold last week, I thought was pretty impressive, all things considered. I believe he had 11 targets in that football game.
Yeah, and he can create mismatches on nickelbacks and linebackers, and that's what you want to do in terms of this ball game. Obviously, San Francisco is going to take away your number one option, most likely. That's St. Brown. That's the quarterback to wide receiver relationship that Goff has. So secondary receivers, we talk Josh Reynolds. I'm expecting a big game out of Jamison Williams. 2 catches last week, 35 yards, has a low total this week as well. Third option, Jahmyr Gibbs potentially coming out of the backfield. I look at the recipe too in terms of how Green Bay attacked it with Aaron Jones, Donnie. They utilized him in regards to the pitch, get him out in space. That's where Jahmyr Gibbs does his best work. One-on-one opportunities, had 72 rushing yards, breaks the touchdown in terms of the fourth quarter to solidify that ball game against Tampa Bay. They have to get Jahmyr Gibbs going, not just in regards to the rush attack, but potentially the short to intermediate passing game today.
Yeah, the 2 running backs here obviously controlling the flow for me would be Christian McCaffrey, obviously, for the San Francisco 49ers. But to me, like I've said it all week long, if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't have over 50 yards, Detroit is getting splashed in this football game. I honestly believe that. You saw last week the point of attack here and emphasis for the Green Bay Packers was an athletic running back that can get out to the edges, and Aaron Jones did that last week. If you can have that same type of performance out of Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not even asking for 110 yards rushing, but give me that 4.5-plus yards per carry to keep them in it. I think it could be a legitimate game here. I'm excited about what we have as the aspects of scoring in this game. I just have to decide on where that lever is getting pressed down at.
We will, again, continue to dive into the player props for both of these games here. There's a lot of interesting weapons on both sides there. And, look, there is a chance, though, if this Niners-Lions game is able to get through this total, it likely means that a lot of these guys had major success against their numbers. We'll continue to break it down, but a sharp report is up next on George Kittle.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but he's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant and then got the job with the Niners and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today. Sports Grid Network, Sirius XM Channel 159. We're going to dive into it. Big game out there on the West Coast today. It's the Detroit Lions. It's the San Francisco 49ers. And we got a focus here on George Kittle. Here's the Sharp Report.
I am a big fan of leaning into George Kittle and taking some of the overs on his props this week because I think there's two ways for success. Number one, Deebo Samuel is not out there or he's out there in a limited capacity. When Deebo Samuel's not on the field, George Kittle is targeted on 23% of routes run. That's actually a higher rate than Brandon Ayuk. And so I think George Kittle is going to get some of that workload. Now, he's not going to get that wide receiver one workload. That's going to go to Brandon Ayuk. He's in for a good game as well. But George Kittle, who's got a lower receiving prop, I think he's going to get a lot of the work because of the absence of Deebo Samuel. And then in addition, you've got the other way with even if Deebo's out there, this is still in our favor. And that is that this Detroit Lions defense is terrible against tight ends. They actually rank one of the 10th worst teams in yards per attempt allowed to tight end targets. They've struggled mightily against tight ends, and they haven't really even played any good tight ends. They allowed a decent game to Cade Otton last week after he went off the week before. They should have been tuned up to try to slow down Cade Otton. He still was able to have a lot of success last week, and that's Cade Otton we're talking about, not George Kittle. There's only been 2 tight end ones that this defense has faced all year, and they struggled in those games. They allowed 2 touchdowns to Mark Andrews, and they allowed Cole Kmet to go for 66 yards on 5 catches. I think those are the 2 best tight ends that this team has played. They're going to be in for a world of hurt when they go up against George Kittle.
Great breakdown there for Warren Sharp. Cannot wait for this game to get started. This game will kick 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Detroit, San Francisco. Line about -7.5, depending on where you're shopping at right now. Totals looking around 51.5. Precipitation in the forecast? Absolutely not. We got a clean environment out of Santa Clara. 70 degrees, no rain, light winds. Let's have some fun. Hour number 2 coming up next. Don't go anywhere.